Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a webinar on the Gender Equality Plan in Horizon Europe. And my name is Anne Pépin. I'm a Senior Policy Officer in the gender sector in DG Research and Innovation. And I will be your facilitator for this webinar today. Here is the agenda for today. We will first hear about our Director General, from our Director General, Jean-Éric Paquet. I will walk you through the details of the Gender Equality Plan eligibility criterion, and we will have two testimonies from two different organizations that will share their experiences with implementing, designing gender equality plans. And finally, you will have plenty of time to ask your question in the Q&A that will follow. So first, let's hear about our Director General.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good morning to this webinar on gender equality plans, which are being rolled out across Europe in research organizations, universities, public research organizations. And I think we're seeing a lot of progress, which builds on, I think, at least a decade of work happening across European institutions to ensure that we can promote gender equal research policies and research teams. And as said, progress is good. What the Commission wanted as it prepared Horizon Europe, and that was very much the vision of Commissioner Maria Gabriel, was to continue to promote these gender equality plans and also go one step further to ensure that we complete the deployment of these plans across all these research organizations and universities in Europe, which is why it was decided, also with the co-legislator in Horizon Europe, to make gender equality plans an eligibility requirement for beneficiaries under Horizon Europe. This is an important change, one, of course, which has required a significant attention and institutional investment in many organizations across Europe. We were well aware of that, which is why we announced that requirement already very early last year in 2021, as we were starting to roll out Horizon Europe, and indicated that there would be more than a year's grace period, and this eligibility requirement would start to apply for calls starting in 2022. So we are now there. If you represent a research organization which intends to participate in a consortia in a project now in 22, for you to be eligible, you will need such a gender equality plan in place by the time we contract with you. So we know the work is happening, but we thought it was also important to ensure that all of you were fully aware not just of that obligation, I take it you are, as you're attending the webinar, but that we also take time to explain exactly what the expectation is formally, but also in terms of policy, and that we allow you to prepare and finalize these gender equality plans so that they are solid, because for the Commission, this is a key requirement, as said, of eligibility, a key policy requirement. This will not be a box ticking exercise. So it's good that you decided to join today. The gender equality team here in DG Research and Innovation with colleagues also in our agencies is delighted to welcome you. And I wish you really productive discussions and a lot of success in deploying these key plans. Thank you very much.
So you've heard from Jean-Éric Paquet. Now let's go into the details of this new eligibility criterion. So this criterion applies to public bodies, research organizations, and higher education establishments from member states and associated countries, not from non-associated third country. And these organizations, these legal entities, need to have in place a gender equality plan to be eligible to participate in Horizon Europe. And these gender equality plans need to fulfill some mandatory requirements, and I will walk you through those. First, this is a self-declaration. This is part of the legal entity validation process through a questionnaire, and I will show you this questionnaire. This is also requested at proposal stage in the application forms, and in the short run and soon enough, it will be actually directly imported from the participant register. So you will no longer need to fill in that question in the application forms. And this, as Jean-Éric Paquet has underlined, starts now with calls with deadlines in 2022 and beyond. So it doesn't apply to private for-profit entities, SMEs, and NGOs or civil society organizations. What is a gender equality plan? So this is a document, but it's actually a set of actions that are aimed to address gender inequality issues in your organization through specific measures that you put in place, specific targets that you assign to yourself, and specific timelines and responsibilities for implementing these actions. It's a document, and of course, it's really specific to your organization. All organizations are different. There are very small ones, some large, very distributed ones with a lot of departments. So this is really specific to your specific type of organization, your context, your national context. So it's not a copy-paste from another organization gender equality plan, although you can get inspired, and we will give you some examples from measures put in place by other organizations. And it's really something that you should build by engaging the whole organization. So the staff, the student, if you're a student organization, the top leadership, of course, and different stakeholders should be involved in the design and the implementation of this plan. And in this case, for Horizon Europe, we have set out a number of mandatory requirements and some recommended areas to be addressed. So this is a process. And really, you should start with the state of play in your organization, doing an audit, a review, then designing your plan, implementing it, monitoring it, evaluating it, and start again. So this is ongoing, and again, it should engage the whole education. So this is a very standard organizational change cycle, which should be repeated to really produce effective results in your organizations. Now, key things to remember and to keep in mind. This is, you need to comply with this if you're a legal entity by filling in a questionnaire, and you will need to meet specific requirements. I already said that. If it's not called a gender equality plan, but it's called a diversity and inclusion strategy, or even if you have different documents, but they still fulfill the mandatory requirements that I'll be describing next, it's also acceptable. There is, just as Jean-Éric Paquet mentioned, an effective tolerance to actually have in place a gender equality plan, which lasts until the grant agreement preparation stage. So if you do not have your gender equality plan in place at proposal submission stage, it's okay. It will not block you from submitting your proposal. It will not impact on the evaluation of your proposal, but you will need it at grant agreement preparation stage. Otherwise, that step will be blocked, and organizations that are supposed to have one and do not will not be allowed to sign the grant agreement and to be part of the project. Then when you sign the model grant agreement, this commits you to striving towards equal opportunities between women and men in the full implementation of your action. And this, of course, should be also in line with your institutional level gender equality plan. And we do not ask you to upload your plan or to provide a link. It's really only this questionnaire, but it might happen that we will ask you and we will check the contents, and because there will be compliance checks in the duration of the program, and first pilot checks will start later this year. So it's not a tick box exercise. We will really check that it's in place, compliant, and implemented. So importantly, This questionnaire I talked to you about is to be filled by the legal entity appointed representative, the LEAR, and I will walk you through the different steps so it's very clear where you need to fill that in, and because we noticed that a lot of LEARs had not yet filled in this questionnaire. So if your organization is already registered, so if you already have a PIC, then this is how it should go. You go onto the Funding and Tenders portal under My Organizations. There, you ask to modify your organization. You go under the Legal Information tab. You edit this legal information, and at the bottom, almost, of this, you will see the button for changing the GEP. You click on it, a pop-up window appears, you press on the yes, and there you will see the questionnaire. So this is a self-declaration, but it's really considered as an official statement from your organization that you are confirming that you are having a gender equality plan in place that fulfills the mandatory requirements, and that is, and I will list these mandatory requirements right now. There are 4 of those, and I'll go into the detail very soon. It needs to be a public document, formally signed by the top leadership of your organization and available on your public website. You need to have dedicated resources to implement it. It needs to be evidence-based, so you need to collect and monitor sex and/or gender disaggregated data and report annually on it. And you need to build capacity, raise awareness on gender equality issues, and in particular on unconscious biases in research and innovation organization. So unless these 4 mandatory or you need these 4 mandatory requirements to be filled, so yes to be ticked and corresponding to the reality to be considered compliance. Then we also recommend some areas to be covered, and I will go later through each of these, but these are not mandatory. So once you have a compliance GEP, you will see that the yes button appears here. And that's the yes flag that project officer will be checking in the grant agreement preparation phase. If you're not yet registered in the portal, you should go under how to participate in the participant register, and there register your organization. So first pop-up window, and then that's the identification. Then you have the organization data and the legal information tab, and there, again, you will see the access to the gender equality plan questionnaire. Now, more details on these mandatory process-related requirements. 4 of those: public document, dedicated resources, data collection and monitoring and reporting, and training and capacity building. I will go through all of these with a few examples. Public document. Like I said, formal document, it can be several. If you fulfill the 3 other mandatory requirements in different documents, you can produce one single document that recalls that it's in different documents, signed by the top management and actively disseminated through the organization. It should be known that you have a gender equality plan known internally and externally. 2 examples: the University of Deusto in Spain actually has its GEP in 3 languages, in Spanish, in Basque language, and in English on its public website, and details what is comprised in their gender equality plan, also highlights gender equality audits that they have put in place. And the Estonian Research Council, so here a research funding organization, also has one gender equality plan publicly available, approved by its management, displayed on the website, and reviewed every year. And it looks both at the organization itself and to the impact of its programs. Dedicated resources. These can be human resources and financial resources. It can be, for example, to fund gender equality positions, gender equality implementing teams. It's always best to have many people representing different categories. Like I said, engage your whole organization to implement the gender equality plan. Just one officer working part-time is not real enough to implement a gender equality plan in an organization. You can earmark time, work time from certain categories of personnel working in the gender equality implementing team, and you should recognize their participation. So 3 examples here. The German Research Foundation has actually an office that is for equal opportunity, for research integrity, and cross-program development. So that's one example. The Academy of Finland has actually an equality and non-discrimination working group with representatives from both the employer, the leadership, and the personnel. And it implements and coordinates the implementation of its equality and non-discrimination plan. And there again, it's both for the organization itself and in its program, in funding programs, make sure that gender inequalities are addressed. Or the Jagiellonian University in Poland has established actually a whole new department that is responsible for ensuring gender equality, also physical and psychological well-being. Data collection and monitoring. Like I said earlier, your plan should tackle issues that are happening in your organization. You should align it with the state of play, so you need to collect and monitor data that is disaggregated by sex or by gender identity, if that's the way you function. And you should report annually on the progress you have made. So define indicators and measure the progress on these. In the GECO project, which is one of the projects that we have been funding under Horizon 2020 to design and implement gender equality plans in several organizations, they have developed a whole series of tools, concrete tools, Excel files that can help you in looking at the kind of data that you could collect in different categories of staff and students. That can be helpful. The University of Belgrade actually has developed a gender equality audit for the HR management, which is also very well done. And the ACT project, another one of the projects that we have funded under Horizon 2020, has developed a gender equality audit and monitoring tool, which also looks at qualitative indicators, a climate survey to really understand the level of awareness and the actual level of gender equality in the organization. This can all be helpful. And finally, training and capacity building. This is essential. You need to raise awareness on the issues. There's a large body of research studies, work that demonstrate that there are gender equalities in research and innovation and higher education institution. So there's really a lot of material you can build training and capacity building on. And one very important thing that you should cover in particular are unconscious gender biases. And the example of the online training that has been developed by Trinity College Dublin in Ireland through another of those gender equality plan implementing Horizon 2020 funded projects, so it's the SAGE project. This is very well done, and it's a free of charge, and you can follow the training online. And the FESTA project, another of our funded project, has developed a specific toolkit for supervising PhDs, which is gender sensitive. Now, these are really basic process-related requirements that I just described. But of course, your plan needs to have some content. It needs to address issues that are taking place in your organization. And this set of 5 thematic content areas are are the result, let's say, of a consensus of a large-scale consultation that we carried out over the past 2 years, involving many of our GEP implementing projects and also national level stakeholders and different types of organization. And there's a consensus on the fact that these are really typical thematics that a gender equality plan in research and innovation should address. There can be others, but these are really common, so I will detail these a little bit. Work-life balance and organizational structure, gender balance in leadership and decision-making, gender equality throughout the career, so from recruitment and career progression, integration of the gender dimension into the contents of the research and of the teaching, and measures to address gender-based violence and sexual harassment. So the first one, work-life balance and organizational culture. This is really about changing your organization and really trying to be more inclusive, giving more visibility to women in your organization, valuing contribution of all staff, and also paying attention to the way you allocate workloads. And it can also cover gender, even induction events. And of course, it's very much related to everything that's around family leave policies, flexibility in your working arrangement, caring responsibilities, supporting these. Again, a very typical measure that is often put into place is reintegration of staff after a career break, which often is linked, for example, to maternity or other parental leave that have been taken, and offering some advice to dual career couples, for example. So these are examples. Here are concrete examples of what organizations are doing. The Henken School of Economics in Finland have actually defined as a rule that they extend temporary contract when research personnel is on maternity or paternity or parental leave. And this is embedded in their gender equality and equal treatment plan. And the University of Trento has actually a certification, a family audit certification that I have developed, and that includes measures on the flexibility of working arrangements. The French National Center for Scientific Research, and you will hear more about what they're putting in place later. And just like universities, most of them in France, allows researchers that actually have teaching responsibilities to be relieved from those duties when they come back to work after a maternity leave, for example. Now, gender balance in leadership and decision-making. Things that you should think about. You will see in most organizations, the higher you go into the hierarchy, the less women you will find. And it's really about thinking about relieving the barriers that women can encounter when wanting to access to decision-making position. It's also ensuring that there's gender balance in decision-making committees. It's about training on this. One of the mandatory requirements is to train on unconscious gender biases, and it's particularly important for decision-making officers and leaders. And this can also be done through quotas or targets that you set yourself. And it's also about providing support. And some concrete examples of what some organizations are doing. The Ghent University in Belgium has set as a rule and a quota, actually, that there should be a 40-60% gender representation in their board of governors. And if this is not reached, then the candidate with the least votes from the overrepresented sex will be replaced by the candidate from the other sex, the underrepresented sex, with the highest number of votes. So by implementing this measure, they actually reach gender balance in the Board of Governors. That's one example. You can go more deeply into capacity building on unconscious gender biases, and this is something that the Swedish Research Council does with observations that are organized in evaluation panels for proposals that they receive. So, and then building on this, they improve on their processes and their procedures. The Czech Higher Education Research and Science Ministry, well, actually the section on higher education research and science in the Education, Youth and Sports Ministry has such a target of 40% of both sexes on all advisory boards and evaluation committees. So these are examples of measures that are currently put in place. Then, gender equality in recruitment and career progression. This, of course, is a very big piece. It covers many different steps, and it can really work on many levels. Of course, again, training the evaluation committees, the recruitment committees, making sure you have a gender equality experts or maybe an observer in these committees, being aware of any gender stereotype language that you use when you announce positions publicly, paying attention to the quality rather than to the quantity. This is also very much related to the revision currently taking place on research assessment of researchers and of research. So there's a lot of work going on this. And examples of this from KU Leuven in Belgium. So they actually established gender vanguards. So that's a full professor that's member of the faculty assessment committee, and they are well informed and on gender equality issues, and they are present on all assessment and recruitment and promotion committees. That's one example. The research centers of Catalonia have actually developed several videos, and there's one on recruitment bias in a research institute that is now quite well known. It's also the video, for example, that is used by the European Research Council in many trainings of their evaluation standing panels. And the Higher Education Authority in Ireland actually reflected on the workload allocation model, asking all higher education institutions in Ireland to adopt a model that is transparent and to monitor for gender bias. And this is now implemented in all universities in Ireland. The integration of the gender dimension in research and training, well, curricula, actually, content. This is not about gender balance in research team. This is really about your research questions, how you take into account potential sex differences, gender differences, so biological or socio-cultural differences, or how you make sure that your research and innovation benefits to the whole of society, so and promote gender equality. So this, of course, is pretty obviously relevant in all health-related research and social science and humanities, but it's also very important in other fields of research, in artificial intelligence, for example. And this is also why the Commission itself is setting the integration of the gender dimension in research and innovation content as a requirement by default in all funded research and innovation actions. So we are doing this ourselves, and you will see other research funding organizations also are. So really, this is implementing sex and gender analysis and paying attention to intersecting social categories whenever relevant. Examples of this, Science Foundation Ireland requires now, like Horizon Europe does, that potential biological sex and socio-cultural gender dimension be considered as key analytical explanatory variables in the research, and that applicants demonstrate that they have given full attention, full consideration to these potential aspects in their research. And there's a specific guidance on this. And I can also underline that very recently, nature-related journals, so from the Nature magazine, have also, referring to the new requirements in Horizon Europe, asked applicants, potential papers that are submitted to the Nature journals to pay attention to this. This is now a new requirement. The German Environment Agency also actually has this as a rule and went a step further in including a gender impact assessment process in all the research projects that they approve, before they are approved. A different example, one that is related to curricula, is what the diagnostic self-assessment checklist developed by the Gearing Roles project, another one of those GEP implementing projects that we have funded, has been developed, and there's a specific toolkit on how to also integrate gender-sensitive approach to research and training. So I will, yes, there's one very important fifth recommended areas to be addressed, which is gender-based violence, including sexual harassment. And here, you should really think about prevention, investigation, reporting procedures, supporting victims, accompanying them, and also about disciplinary measures. So, and also raising awareness on what gender-based violence is and what sexual harassment is and how to prevent that. And you could adopt some code of conduct. That is also something that is quite common in several organizations. Here, the example of the Ministry of Science, Innovation and Universities in Spain. They require that all research-performing organizations have a sexual harassment protocol adopted and in place. And this, they also support this with information on trainings, on gender-based violence, and studies, actually, on prevalence and the impact of sexual harassment on staff and students that are affected, and on the working environments, the safety of the whole organization. In Sciences Po Bordeaux, they have established a specific sexual harassment monitoring unit, and that's part of their gender equality plan that was also developed through the SAGE project. And so they cover the whole range of activities that should be taken into account. And a project that is going on right now is the UNICEF project that we're funding under Horizon 2020, and that really is looking at what member states are doing at national level to support this, to support organization in addressing these issues. Also carrying out currently a prevalence study, and they will come up with recommendations. So watch in the coming month, there will be even more concrete recommendation, concrete examples of things that can be put into place. And there it is for the 4 process-related building blocks, the 5 recommended thematic areas to be addressed. And again, there's most of the examples I gave you, they're taken from a guidance that we have published in September last year on gender equality plans, with many more examples there. The GEAR tool, Gender Equality in Academia and Research tool, that we have co-developed with the European Institute for Gender Equality, also has a wealth of examples, and it's a step-by-step guide on how to implement gender equality plans. And it has been recently updated. You can see here, if I can, so here there's even a specific section referring to the gender equality plan eligibility criterion in Horizon Europe. And many of those projects that I mentioned, and there are much more, and you have the links. You will have the PowerPoint available on the event web page after this presentation. And yes, I can maybe highlight the Gendered Innovation 2 report, which gives concrete example and methodologies on how to integrate the gender dimension in specific scientific fields that correspond very closely to the clusters in Horizon Europe. And now it will be my pleasure to introduce our 2 speakers. And so you will have examples from 2, like I said, very different organizations. Here, a smaller size university focusing on science and technology, and in a Central and Eastern, actually Balkan country. And you will hear from Professor Jasminka Hasic-Telalovic. And I will leave the floor to you, Jasminka, right away. So this is an institution, the Sarajevo School of Science Technology from Bosnia and Herzegovina. The floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much, Anne. I hope I can be heard and seen well. So yes, as you said, I'm coming from Sarajevo, Sarajevo School of Science Technology. I am myself a computer scientist, and I actually somehow got involved with gender issues. And I must say, with the help of European projects. First, it was participation in cost action, science, technology, environment cost action, and I learned quite a bit about the data and the problems in higher education. I reflected on my personal career, on the personal circumstances, and I really realized how big of a problem gender equality at higher education is, and how much we can all as a society benefit if we solve this kind of a problem. But then, you know, again, I know many people are still not aware, and we have to do a lot of awareness raising in order for us to be able to actually go on with the implementation of our gender equality plans. So I don't see where I'm going to see my presentation. Okay. So yes, so as Annie correctly pointed out, you know, we have to really make sure that our gender equality action plans come from the data. And maybe just before I start with this, just to say that I'm very honored. You know, we are from a widening country, EU aspiring country. We don't get to speak a lot in Brussels, so thank you very much for picking me actually to be the voice today. And I'm very flattered to have this opportunity, and I'm very happy if my experience will be helpful for some of the people who are listening. So basically, the reason I managed to get involved with gender equality is because I participated in one of these Horizon 2020 projects. You referenced it several times, and it's the SAGE project, coordinated by the TC Trinity College Dublin, that previously participated in another project where they implemented their gender equality plan, and then they shared their knowledge with us. So we were able to do it. So basically, we have these 5 sort of intermingled phases. First of all, the preparation for the implementation, and during this phase, you have to make sure that We gather some allies that people at the institution are aware what's happening, that they understand what's happening, that they understand methodology and understand also the what's happening and why are we doing this and why is this really beneficial, what sort of things that it's going to bring us. Then we have to make sure that our GEP is really something that is based on the real needs of our institution. So that's why we have to perform this baseline analysis. Then we have to do action planning. What are we going to do about it? What kind of things can we do? And what sort of targets can we set? And how can we check those targets, whether we're meeting them? So we put all this in a plan. We start with the implementation, and then of course we have to keep on always monitoring and checking what's happening. So now, because I'm coming from computer science, IT, this would be sort of like a waterfall approach where we have clearly divided, planned the sections, but of course they always have to intermingle. We have to be able to do this in an agile way and jump from one to another, to adjust actions, during the monitoring evaluation if they need to be adjusted and so forth. But we have to constantly keep on pushing our actions and the targets they should be changing. So so as I said, we've started working. The first action gender equality plan I worked with was actually with the International University of Sarajevo. That was the next door institution that I was at, and recently, well, 3-4 years back, I've changed to Sarajevo School of Science Technology, where we also implemented gender equality plan. But all the knowledge that I gained through SAGE was instrumental for setting both of those. And I must say that there's a great wealth at that time, when I was coming to grasp, with how to best argue, how to best set up, there was a great wealth of knowledge coming from UK and Ireland, just because, they have this Athena Swan program that's set up by their higher education agency, where they accredit the departments and institutions for gender equality. So also, even though they are the most advanced in addressing gender equality, what we've found out, because we work together with a bunch of institutions within the Horizon project who were implementing the gender equality plan, is that even though we have similar trends in statistics, so there is the leaky pipeline with women, how fast the women are progressing with their careers, and all these different statistics, that the trends are the same. The absolute numbers are a bit different. So there is higher percentages in some of the European or Horizon participating European nations at a time. But we have similar trends, and even though we all developed our own plans, we still could benefit quite a bit from this collaboration. So these videos, I'm not going to play them now, but as Anne said, the slides will be available. So I think I find those two particularly interesting for this raising the awareness on the unconscious bias that all of us have. So it's not a problem of men. It's not a problem of some men or some women. It's most of us really carry this unconscious bias. So what's good is also, this is a bit of an outdated, perhaps, example, but, we have to see that these measures that are implemented in gender equality plans, they make a difference. So here we have a data from the Irish Research Council, where in 2013, they had 40-some% of the STEM applicants for the postdoc awards. And then in the end, the awards went to 30-some% to the females. So then they were wondering if there's something that could be done. So maybe because of the gender, was there a different kind of evaluation? So then they did something in between 2013 and 2014 that changed these numbers. And then we see that in 2015, even though the fewer female applicants were made, the awardees, the percentage of awardees has increased. And the actual measure, this dashed line that has happened, is that the proposals were anonymous, so there was no name attached, and also all the pronouns were removed. So basically, you couldn't tell whether the applicant was male or female. So we see that gender blinding really makes quite a bit of a difference in evaluations for grants in this example. So how do we make an institutional gender equality plan? What is the best time to start the process? And the EU has made this, European Commission has made it easy for us by making this a requirement. So I don't think anybody can wait. If you haven't started it, the best time is right now. I will talk a bit more about the information that's needed to begin, and then what's the best way to get from start to finish. I will share some of our experiences, but again, this is a journey that everybody. It's a self-discovery, and based on how the data that you find in your institution guides you, that's the way you're going to go. So this is the methodology that I've used. And it comes from the Horizon 2020 SAGE project. So it's called the so-called the SAGE wheel. So it's just a single photo, but it's so meaningful. So basically we start, the essence of it is the middle of the wheel, where we must have the disaggregated data. So basically whatever data we collect, we just add one column, male, female, other, or whatever, however it works in your institution. And then come and do all the different statistics with all the different data. So then based on that, and talk about 5 possible areas that need to be addressed by the gender equality plan. But here we had 4: the institutional governance. So basically, how do we govern institution, and then how much the women really participate in that governance. Then engendering knowledge. So how do we do research, and how do we teach? Do we enforce these unconscious biases, or do we provide a sort of gender neutral environment where everyone can flourish and all the needs can be addressed? Then there's the career progression, and of course the work-life balance, which is thought to cause a lot of these gender inequalities that end up. So I really recommend, not just SAGE, but also Anne has shared a wealth of knowledge that came out from the different Horizon projects. And I think, there's no wrong way to go, but if you're looking for the best tool, just take a look at these slides that Anne has done, and take a look at these different kinds of toolkits and see what might be the best for your institution. So to make your gender equality plan, what are the ingredients? So first of all, you must examine the context that you are in, sort of what is the general climate and how to best approach it, to sort of strategize. You have to secure the commitment of the key people, because not one person can push this. This has to be a collective effort of a bunch of people, and of course you always have to have somebody from the management that will support the implementation and the setup of the plan. Then should have the institutional self-assessment team. I would recommend that this team is very diverse. Even though gender is often thought of just as social sciences, it's not. In higher education, we cannot address, not just the social sciences can address it. We have to address it in diverse environments in all the fields. So having a very diverse field across the different faculties of the institution, that's something that I think that's the way it should be done. And it has worked for us very well. And then we always have to audit and assess the impact of the policies that we have made. But of course, the gender equality plan has to come from our own data, and there is the quantitative and the qualitative data that we have to come up with. So in terms of the base data, these are the actual tables of the data that we went around the institution and collected. So just 11 Excel tables where we look at, collected all this data, just added the male, female column, and of course, what we found out that a lot of this data hasn't been kept in a gender segregated way. So that's a good exercise to really discover where is this data stored in the institution, how it's stored, and then to make sure that it is kept in gender segregated way. So there is the after that, collecting the base data, then there is the quantitative and qualitative data. So here in this case, my friends from were actually the ones that have led this research at the institution, and the actual survey questions and the way how to conduct the interviews and focus groups for the qualitative data, we've got quite a lot of guidance from our SAGE project as well. And basically, this is how we discovered what do we have in our institution. So then we carefully analyzed that and basically somehow structured it in an Excel file. So basically, GEP is just one Excel file where you have, depending on how many topics you are addressing. In our case, we had 4, but really the 5th one, the gender-based violence, was part of the institutional governance. And then we devised the smart action, specific, measurable, and so forth, timed, accurate, and whatnot else. So with the timing, with who is responsible, how we're going to measure the success, and so forth. So then we create this Excel table, and it has to satisfy these 4 requirements that Anne has also mentioned. The first one is that is a public document. So I told you that SSST has, we just finished actually developing the GEP at this institution, and it's now we're starting with the implementation in September. So we have this requirement. It is a public document. It's been actually endorsed by the Senate, and so that first requirement has been satisfied. So if we can, yes. So see this logo I have up here, and this is actually something that we had specially designed for our GEP. So it's used just for our GEP and nowhere else. But we just in this document we describe a little bit about this methodology, what we have used. And if we can go to the next slide. So these are then just these 4 sheets from the Excel where we explain, they're quite dense sheet. There's quite a lot of data, but it's really, the plan is just, like in total 8 pages long. So it's not that lengthy, but the data there is very, very well structured. So one thing, maybe one measure that I can mention from this plan is about engendering teaching, because a lot of times, it is said, okay, it's easy to integrate, research in the gender studies, but then, what do I do with gender in, I don't know, computer science, let's say, and that's something that I often have to argue. So, and of course, if we can go to the next slide. Yeah, okay, so basically one thing that Anne has already mentioned, and I have one example, is that there is one big part of computer science, a big challenge is artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, and we're collecting all sorts of data and trying to reference new knowledge from it. But then if our data is biased, and it's not just the gender that's the issue, but there's all sorts of biases in the data that we are collecting, then the results, what we refer, is also going to be biased. So in order for us to train, unbiased artificial intelligence, we must be aware, first of all, what this bias is and how it's done. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but first I want to talk about the dedicated resources. So for the implementation of the plan, we do need to have some resources, but then I also want to say that a lot of these measures that we have in the GEP don't really concern any gender. They're really about improving the institutional governance and different how different offices work and operate. So it's more about making sure that everything is thought well and organized well. So it's actually by implementing a gender equality plan at our institutions, we also help our institutions to be governed better. And because of that, I think it's much easier to find the dedicated resources because it's generally improvement of the institution function. We have to keep on the data collections and monitoring. They have to be refreshed each year with the new numbers, monitor the trends and so forth. And of course, we have to keep on training our people, understanding where they come from, educating about where the institution is going, why is it important to address these biases, and what good is it going to bring us all as an institution if we have all gender participate and make full use of their talent. So this is just a quick example I whipped up actually this morning, just as an example of how AI can be biased. So it's a Google Translate. It's probably one of the most used tools that uses AI currently in the world. And what I did, Bosnian is a highly gendered language. Everything has a gender pretty much. English is not so much. So what I did, I actually took some sentences in Bosnian, translated into English, and then back to Bosnian. So then when I, for example, started with an occupation such as nurse, it still remained female when I went Bosnian, English, Bosnian. But when I used the doctor, the female version of a doctor, translated to English and then back to Bosnian, my doctor became a male, actually. Then if I did a teacher, the teacher came back as a female. But then if I did a professor, there's actually two versions. If there was this, if it was translated as the professor held her classes very well yesterday, it did go into the female version. But if it was just the professor held classes very well yesterday, it was translated as a male professor. So the nurse, the doctor, the teacher, the professor. So if you have the higher positions, even the AI is biased, and it would translate in with the male and so forth. So this is just a motivation why we as a computer scientist need this, but this is across all the different disciplines. And I think that's all I wanted to say. If any of you have any sort of questions afterwards, please feel free to reach out, and very happy to be here and share our experience.
Much for this very clear presentation. And now I will give the floor to Mathieu Arbogast, who is project manager at the Gender Equality Office at the French National Center for Scientific Research, which is called in French the Mission pour la place des femmes au CNRS in France. So, Mathieu, c'est à toi.
Thank you. Well, we can move directly to the next slide, maybe to the second slide. Yes, just to remind or to give a quick overview of what is CNRS. So it's in French, obviously. We are a public institution, a public RPO, which has the specificity to cover all fields. We are divided in 10 institutes. We have one in physics, one in math, one in social sciences, in biology, etc. We cover approximately all the fields. We have also the specificity as a national institution to be very widespread all over France. We have actually more than 1,000 labs, mostly joint labs integrated with universities, so all over France. Interestingly, the story of gender equality at CNRS is closely intertwined with the European Union. The very creation of my unit, so the unit I'm working in, the gender equality unit, it started with an impulse of the European Union and the Helsinki group, for people who know what it was. So a little more than 20 years ago, our unit was created. So we obviously have dedicated resource to gender equality and our equality plan. But it didn't start with a gender equality plan itself. The first plan itself was built in the frame of an EU-funded project, one of the first ones, but as you heard, there are quite a few now. This one, Integer, allowed us to make a very in-depth diagnosis and cross-diagnosis. One partner analyzing the situation in the other partner, etc. So we had our first GEP elaborated in 2014, and it was also the result of a large consultation involving the decision bodies at local level, and also particularly at the headquarters. We continued to build on EU-funded projects to improve our measures in this larger project, GenderNet. We also elaborated a few guides, namely guides to implement to use internal award programs to promote gender equality and to give more visibility to the female talents. We also very recently took part in GE Academy, mentioned mentioned earlier by Anne Pépin, which was the goal was to implement Europe-wide trainings to elaborate, to implement GEPs, and also to have tools to integrate the gender dimension in research. And thanks to COVID, in a way, most of the training materials were online and recorded, so they are now available online for everybody. And the videos are translated in all the languages of the European Union. But something happened in France 3 years ago. There was a new French law making mandatory that all public organizations must have a 3-year GEP by year 2021. So it was new because our plan in 2014, we decided on our own what to put in it. But now we have this frame with four mandatory axes. First, to analyze and draw measures to reduce the gender pay gap. Second axis to ensure equal access to all levels of positions. Third, to improve the work-life balance. And also, it's also something common with the requirement of the European Union. We have to act against gender-based violence, GBV. So, and we took, of course, this frame to build our new our new GEP, which is online at this address. You will find it with the slides later on. Maybe next. Yes, thank you. How did we do it? Well, as we already had actions since 2001, as we already took the opportunity to involve in different European initiatives, we decided to look for synergies. First, we looked for synergies with our HRS for our actions, because since 2017 we benefit from this label, and we have several actions about gender equality. So we decided to embed them in our GEP and to elaborate and improve them as a follow-up. We also, of course, learned from what worked and sometimes not worked or not that well in our previous 2014 plan. And we paid particularly attention to design actions involving people at all levels in our organizations. Not only because we are all over the country, but it is part of the issue. So we have actions involving the CEO, particularly actions involving the regional offices, actions also involving people inside the labs. We have more than 1,000 labs, so it involves quite a lot of people. CNRS is approximately 30,000 people, half of them full-time researchers, and the other half being support staff. Many people were also involved in the elaboration of this current plan. It was even discussed with the unions, and it was eventually voted by the Board of Trustees. So it is voted and approved by the highest authority in our organizations. Now, I won't mention the 50 something actions, but first, of course, we have excuse me about that. First, of course, we have, like anybody else, data. We have quite a big annual gendered HR report, which is published online. It's 200 pages thick document with literally dozens of tables. It was improved year after year. It's now something very, very thorough. I told you we wanted to involve people at every level in the hierarchy. So we decided to have a network of gender equality correspondents, first at a regional level, and now also we have correspondents inside half of our labs, and eventually we intend to have such correspondence in every lab in a few years, hopefully. Also, among the actions, we are slowly implementing mentoring programs, not in every field, but it started particularly in physics. And I told you the CEO is involved. He particularly involved in writing to the evaluation bodies of evaluating the researchers, and he proposed these bodies to implement a cascade principle for promotions. You probably, well, you maybe know about this principle. The basic rationale is that you will promote women, taking into account the proportion, the share of women who are eligible for promotion, even if they under apply. You will not take it into account. You will take into account that the eligible share is bigger, is larger. So it will help, and it does help, promoting more women and making the career, the advancement of the female researchers now closer and closer to the career advancement of their male colleagues. Also, some actions about communication without stereotypps through charters and guidelines. We have many discussions all year long with our communication colleagues, and also short mention, but it is a very big issue. Obviously, we have a plan to train progressively a huge share of our management colleagues, of our managers, about gender-based violence. Just two short focuses now, maybe. One about training. What we decided to do to train our evaluation bodies about gender bias in research and in the career, in recruitment and in the career, is to create an e-learning module of our own. We did it with specialized researchers from our ranks, obviously. It's something quite dense and short. It's only 45 minutes. It is a self-paced online tools, so it is very useful. Everybody, all in any region of France can use it. Unfortunately, for technical reasons, it is only for our staff. Even though sometimes we can give we can open it to outside staff, but it is quite difficult. It's an interactive tool to help memorizing the key issues and the key recommendations of good practices. It's bilingual, so even though we have 30% of foreign-born researchers, they are not left aside, and because it is primarily aimed at researchers, of course, it is evidence-based. Each sentence is supported with science. And the second focus is about gender dimension in research. We had a few initiatives to boost and to foster new research integrating a gender dimension in the past, but more recently we built upon another EU-funded initiative, GenderNet Plus, which is now going to its final event, which will be early in 2023, We funded 30 transnational projects, including all of them a gender dimension, and including many disciplines, not only gender studies, of course. Excuse me about that. So we have more and more dissemination material, and the final conference early next year will also be an opportunity to have proceedings published a little later in the year. But we have also for our staff internally thematic summer schools. We just had one a few weeks ago about gender-based violence, an interdisciplinary school. Next year we will have one about gender and health. So maybe I will finish on this. Well, this slide was just to give a more visual idea of the widespread actions and about the depth of our networks in our institutions. Well, thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you, Mathieu. So you have heard from two very different organizations, a smaller size private university in science and engineering from a widening country, and a large-scale research performing organization from an older member state, public organization. And now we've gone a little bit over time, but if it's okay with most of you, we can stay a little bit longer and we'll try to answer as many questions as possible. And again, this webinar is recorded and you can come back to it later. So, do I read the questions or I read the first question? So, will the slides be available? Yes, of course. I said that earlier, there will be on the event webpage, you will have access to the slides. Is it possible to have the gender equality plan only in one language and not in English? Indeed. Any national EU language can be used for the gender equality plan. Poor Mathieu, he just recovered from COVID-19. I hope you're okay.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's fine. Is it compulsory to have an updated version of the gender equality plan every year published on the website? Well, if you do modify its action, yes, indeed, you should update your gender equality plans once you have reviewed it. If it has changed, you do publish your updated gender equality plan. What if an organization is found not to have a compliant gender equality plan during checks? Is a grace period given to improve it, or organization will be removed from project? If we discover indeed in the compliance check that it's not compliant, it's the standard procedures for non-compliant, for organization not complying to eligibility criteria. So, and that will start with like a pre-announcement letter to the beneficiary. So they will have a certain time period to try to comply. But if it's not the case, then we will terminate the beneficiary's participation in the project. And this might entail also possible refunding of the grants, the budget received until then. And so this normally will not affect the whole project unless that beneficiary plays a key role in the project. If it's a coordinator, for example, or if they cannot be replaced by other partners in the project that could take over their tasks. So it can affect the whole project. Of course, if it's a mono-beneficiary project, I mean, one partner, all their participations in all the projects they are involved in will be terminated. So is the gender equality plan required for private research organization? I said that earlier, private for-profit. So these are not companies, SMEs, they are not concerned at this stage by this eligibility criterion. But if you're a private university, a private research organization performing research, yes, you're concerned. Does the public version of the gender equality plan signed by the top management need to include the mandatory aspects, so resources, training, or can it be confidential? Indeed, you don't need to go into the full detail of the budget that you are allocated to your gender equality plan. This does not necessarily need to be public. And then same thing that I did not underline, but in your data collection and your reporting on your sex and gender disaggregated data, you should, of course, be compliant with the GDPR. That's, in any case, something you need to follow. So if you are a small, less than 10 employees, non-profit under national law, which hold the status of a research organization, yes, the requirement still applies to you, but of course you need to adapt it to your specific context. So it can, I think the 4 process-related steps can still be applied to smaller size organization. Is there a ratio between the size of the organization and the amount of hours to be reserved for working on gender equality? No, not really. No, that's for you to try to analyze. But of course, the larger, you saw how CNRS organized, so it's a smaller size. It's an officer in the case of the private university that Jasminka detailed, or maybe she can give some comments on that. No, there's not a specific ratio, but of course, if you have many constituencies, you should try to have representatives and coordinators, correspondents in each of these. How to report progress in implementing GEP? Well, I already mentioned that there were some tools on how to measure progress on indicators. There are tools that exist on trying to measure the impact of the gender equality plans. One of our projects is finishing soon, the Casper project. You had the link on my final slide. And they're coming up with an impact driver model to try to track the impact of and the change that is occurring in your organization. So there are different tools that do exist, that are available, then you can adapt to your situation. There are many on the GEAR tool as well. So you mentioned that one officer working part-time is not sufficient. Are there guidelines for the number of people and time commitment that's advisable? I think I already answered partly these questions. There are some examples and some recommendations in the different tools that I mentioned in the guidance that we have published. So it's difficult to really give a specific number or working hours, but it's also important that the people and hopefully gender balance teams that work on the design and the implementation of the gender equality plan, that they be recognized for this, so that this be taken into account in their appraisal and their assessment by their organization. So in some domains, gender equality is low among graduates. Is it acceptable that a gender equality plan focuses on equal treatment without targeting staff parity? Do you mean to only address the student population and not address gender inequalities between faculty? I would say no. I mean, of course, you can have more actions, more measures towards the student population if indeed this is a key area of concern and that you need to address. But in general, there are gender equality inequalities among teaching staff and research staff always in most organizations. An organization is categorized as a civil society organization, and in the portal, it is also categorized as a research organization. Is the gender equality plan obligatory? This is surprising. Please refer to the legal entity information document that I refer to in the slide that describes at the beginning of the presentation what the gender equality plan eligibility criterion is and who it applies to. There is a link at the bottom, and that's a document. Of course, it's a self-assessment, but yeah, if you are a research organization, normally it should apply to you. If you are performing research. Is a web page containing all the required information sufficient, or do you require a signed PDF document? I mean, we need to see your gender equality plan, and we need to see proof that it is endorsed by the highest level of your organization. So this information should be publicly available. So if it's not a signature on the PDF document, no, that's fine. But so it should be enough if all the required information is on that web page. I think I answered that one. Okay, are there different requirements depending on the size of the structure? For instance, between a structure in which 10 people work or one with 300 employees. The 4 mandatory process-related requirements are the same. You need to adapt, of course, to your specific characteristics. If it's only 10 people, so it will not be exactly this. It should be simpler into the collection of data and the monitoring. Training, some awareness raising should be easier. And there, maybe if you're only 10 people, if it's one person or all of these 10 dedicated some time to reflect on gender equality, that should be fine. As a very small research center, non-profit based in Belgium, are we concerned by the GEP eligibility criterion? I think I answered that in yes, you are. You can adapt to your situation, but you are concerned. Are there actually opportunities to receive funds in order to implement the gender equality plan? Well, yes, they are, but not sticking with these basic requirements. Under the widening participation and the strengthening the European research area program part of Horizon Europe, there are specific actions aimed at supporting the implementation of inclusive gender equality plans and policies. And by inclusive, we mean looking at intersections between gender and other grounds for discrimination and social categories such as ethnicity and racial origin, disability, age, sexual orientation, for example. These are things that we support in the framework of the new European research area. So there is funding actually a call that closed recently that was like a twinning scheme with more advanced institution mentoring, peer mentoring, less advanced institutions. So, and there was a budget there to implement actions to develop and put in place and advance inclusive gender equality plan. I should also mention that we will be launching shortly a new prize called the Gender Equality Champion Award and the EU Award for Gender Equality Champions. And there are 3 categories, and the first 2 are specifically for organizations that are either well advanced in implementing a gender equality plan and can show sustainability. So it can maybe be of interest for many of your organizations. So it's for research performing organizations, including universities. Another category is really for newcomers that can already show some progress. So this is another category. And the third one is inclusive gender equality plan that are implemented and can show some progress, organizations that do have them. So there are these 3 categories. You will learn more about these opportunities for funding. And there are also many projects to coordinate and support and help also on monitoring, in evaluating the implementation of gender equality plans and inclusive ones. Will you share any tools such as questionnaire for audit or set of indicators? We have already, I think the 2 presenters, the 2 speakers we had today did share some tools. You have links on the slides. There are many examples in the guidance that we produced in the GEAR tool. Really, you can, and many of these projects, you can download these Excel files. So there are tools that we are already sharing, and you will have the links. What is the penalty flexibility for those institutions in the process of putting a GEP in place that have not yet finished setting up all aspects involved? Well, it depends at which stage you are, but again, and I think Jean-Éric Paquet underlined this, that we have announced this measure well in advance at the onset of Horizon Europe, and even before we had announced that, and there are different tools, and there is a flexibility if you don't have it at proposal submission stage. But if your proposal is selected for funding, you enter the grant agreement preparation stage, and then you need to have it. There is no added flexibility at that stage. It blocks the process, and you cannot be funded if you don't have it before the signature of the grant agreement. You won't sign it. Is there a kind of template or model structure the European Commission has prepared or drafted? If you mean a template for what a GEP should look like, there are several, and there's not a specific one. Again, it's not one size fits all. It should be adapted to the diagnosis that you carry out in your institution. So it should be adapted and follow, of course, the process-based requirement, and then which themes you decide to address, that depends on what the state of play is in your organization. Am I right in assuming that affiliated entities or third parties should have a gender equality plan too? Affiliated entities, yes, they are in the grant agreement. They're mentioned, so in the contract, they do need to have one. Third parties, no. So, are there particular items for a suitable gender equality plan as a public sector government agency? We are not a university or research performing organization. Well, it depends if you're... Really, it depends on what is your field of activity. And really keep in mind the process-related mandatory requirements. And if you're a ministry, you can set in place programs, policies, and organize networks. You can do quite a number of activities as a ministry. And as a research funding organization, then it's pretty clear that, of course, you should apply that to your organization, but you should make sure that your programs do not discriminate, you make sure that women participation, if it's less than men's, is promoted, that you ensure gender equality in your evaluation procedures, in your evaluation committees, and try to integrate the gender dimension into the different topics or programs that you may be funding. So it depends in which area you are. So you should adapt it to your situation. Should the gender equality plan target strict gender equality even in cases of female majority? I don't know exactly what you mean, but the idea is to promote gender equality. So indeed, maybe you can think about recruiting or involving more men in your organization, but it's also, many aspects about work-life balance, organizations can still be addressed if you have a women majority. So I don't know, there's no strict gender equality. It's not only about gender balance, the gender equality plan. The speaker is talking about both sexes, but should it be more like all genders? Male, female, non-binary. Well, this depends on the situation in different countries. Across the EU and in associated countries, they're not always the same way of collecting disaggregated data along biological or birth, sex, and gender identity. Not all countries, not all organizations work this way, but for example, in the case of Horizon Europe, this is a novelty that we are opening the possibility for researchers in an inclusive effort to self-declare their gender as women, men, or non-binary. So this is something we're doing at commission level in Horizon Europe. The GEP is available on intranet website for employees. Is it mandatory to integrate on public website? Yes. Again, if you don't want to put the detail of the budget or not the full detail of your gender equality plan, this is okay, but it should be visible and it's important. It can inspire others. It's a public statement and it's important that it be known. Our university has adopted a gender equality plan that explicitly applies to all its faculties. Is that enough, or does each faculty need to have a separate document? Well, if you have one participant identifying code, so the PIC, for the whole university, then it's fine. If each of your faculties has its own PIC, then they each need to have a gender equality plan. And are project partners required to have a gender equality plan? Yes, it's all organizations applying to Horizon Europe that are public bodies, public or private universities, and public or private research organizations need to have a gender equality plan in place. It's not linked directly to a specific project, but it's not only for the coordinator. It's for all the partners that are legal entities that fall under the previous categories. They need to have a GEP in place. Is it possible to have a pre-check of compliance of our GEP? By the Commission, no. But by external evaluators that you will ask, that you will hire to carry out this task, yes, you can, of course. And the checks that we will be carrying out will also be carried out by external independent experts that we will hire to do this task. Is it possible to download the questionnaire before filling it in? The questionnaire is already visible in the General Annexes to the Horizon Europe work program, the main work program. So that's already in the funding and tender portal. If you go to work program text, the General Annexes, you will find it. It's also in all the application forms for the different program parts. You have it there. We are a small non-profit organization with 3 employees. Is it mandatory to have a GEP? If you are an NGO or CSO, no, again, but if you carry out research, yes, it is. But of course, it needs to be adapted to your specific situation. For small organizations, the dedication of resources to implement a GEP is much more difficult. Do you have recommendations, therefore? So if you're talking about, yes, I guess both human and financial resources can be difficult, but again, the size of your gender equality plan will also be in line with the size of your organization, so it should take less time and less efforts normally. And in many cases, some measures are really about changing policies, and they do not cost a lot of budget. So not all measures are costly. And I'm looking at the time. Yes, a few more questions. For small organization, the dedication, no, it's the same one, sorry. One remark, in the expert area on the funding and tenders portal, there are only 2 choices regarding one's gender, not super inclusive. Indeed, this will be changed, but it's the expert database is an old, system, and we are moving to a new one where this 3rd non-binary categories will be introduced. Does the gender equality plan that we have to upload online need to have been signed by the hierarchy? Yes, but like I said earlier, it doesn't need to be a formal signature, but you need to show proof that it's endorsed by the highest level. Bonjour. Does this requirement apply to international organizations? It does not at this stage, because an organization needs to be from a member state or an associated countries. If it has an international status, the requirement right now does not apply to those. Is the online training of GE Academy still available? I wanted to continue, but it says that the videos are private. It will all be, now the project is finished, but they are really consolidating all their legacy material, and it will all be available. The webinars that have been recorded will be available, and there are already more material on how to deliver training, how to certify gender equality trainers. This is all available. If the LEAR was not involved in any way, in the GEP drafting process, what is his responsibility if based on an EC check the GEP is found non-compliant? Well, involved in any way in the drafting of the gender equality plan, that's okay, but they should be fully informed by the unit or the top leadership of the organization that the organization has a compliant GEP. They should be aware of the existing or not of the GEP, of its content, so that they can fill in the questionnaire. They don't have specific, it's not their responsibility, it's the whole organization. So could you confirm if associate countries need a gender equality plan? The UK is still to finalize association with Horizon Europe, so are classed as associate partners at grant agreement stage. It's only for associated countries. So at this stage, UK organizations do not need to have a gender equality plan in place. But most of them, and this was mentioned earlier by Yasminka, many of them do have adopted or have an Athena Swan award or are applying for an Athena Sword certification. So which is a certification that recognizes that you have a gender equality plan in place. And so, of course, if they have one, I mean, all organizations, even private for profit, are encouraged to have one. But if you're non-associated countries, it's not a formal requirement, no. Do the research infrastructures in the form of ERICs need a gender equality plan, but in form of an not need one? So, the ERICs, so the research infrastructures, it's a specific category. We are discussing this, but normally, no, they would not need, or, I mean, if they are in, if their coordinating institution is in a member state and in associated countries, normally that organization will have one. So, but it's a specific status. An association, no. If it's an association, normally it should not apply to them. But we can get back to you in the FAQ on the Funding and portal for a specific response to this. Will there be active monitoring through the periodic report stage or through review meetings throughout the implementation of projects by the Commission? If you're talking about the monitoring of the gender equality plan, it's not attached to a specific project. It's attached to the institution. So it's not something that will be followed in the periodic report or in review meetings. But like I said earlier, when you sign the grant agreement, you commit to trying to support as much as you can gender equality, equal opportunities in the implementation of your action. And this should be, in a way, in line with what you are already doing at the level of your organization. So maybe in the staff that you hire, the students, the early career researcher, trying to pay attention to that. And there's also in that Article 14 of the Model Grant Agreement, a strong focus on trying to progress towards gender balance in the research teams, which is also a ranking criterion at evaluation stage. So in the EU portal, the questionnaire about GEP is not available. Does it mean that a non-profit organization, 8 employees, we do not need, I'm not sure what you mean, because it is available. You like I showed through the little demonstration. It's part of my organization in the participant register, and it's also in the general annexes to the work program, and it's in all the application forms recalled. So I'm not really sure what you're referring to. And maybe I answered two last questions. Publicly available signature of the rector may be a very sensitive issue. Is it not enough to place the GEP on the official notice board? Again, if you self-declare and you prove that it has been endorsed by the highest level, this is fine. If there's an issue about having the signature of the rector, so I'm not sure why it would be a very sensitive issue, but because it has to be bought in and officially endorsed by the highest level. But if it's about showing the signature, then it's not an obligation, of course. And many of the examples are from universities, higher education institutes, and research performing organizations, more on government, public sector organization. I think I answered that earlier. There are more examples in the guidance that we published, and there are also more examples on the GEAR tool. But then it should be more oriented towards the policies that you put in place and the programs that you put in place. So yeah, that's it. And okay, maybe one more. I don't know if there are many more that are left. Okay, so maybe we can continue a little bit. No, that's I answered already. You may have. Are there questions for the two speakers, or it's mainly questions for the Commission? I think. If the LEAR, no, this one I already answered. Are there any plans to make the GEP obligatory also for NGOs, CSOs, and SMEs? If so, when this could be expected? This is under discussion, and so I cannot give a specific date, but for the next work programs, it will, so 23, 24, it's still the set of organization that I mentioned, and we focused on those because these are the organizations that we have funded for over a decade for the implementation of gender equality plans. So there's quite some advancement there, and also there is some support in many of the member states and policies for these types of organizations to have gender equality plans. And right now, for private for-profit SME organization that are applying to the European Innovation Council, there's a whole set also of measures that are focusing more precisely on supporting and promoting women in innovation, women innovators, women founders, and women funders. So I understand it is not mandatory for the NGOs to have a gender equality plan, but is it still recommended by the Commission? Of course. We would recommend that all organizations have one. If already you are thinking about it, it can only benefit your organization to have one. So, of course. We have submitted a proposal in the Horizon call in 2021. Now we are finalizing the grant agreement. Do we need the GEP? No. It's only enforced as of calls that have deadlines this year in 2022. So if this is a call that had a deadline in 2021, no, you will not need to have one this year. the eligibility criterion was not enforced when you submitted your proposal, you were selected, and you signed the grant agreement, and it doesn't apply to you, to the organization in that project. But if these organizations submit proposals to other calls, then in that cases, they will need, in any case, to have a gender equality plan. Are the mentioned tools, such as assessment tool, available free of charge? Yes. Yes. All material, most material, but I would say almost all that comes out of a EU-funded project that is part of deliverables from the project, unless it's specifically stated that it's not for public delivery. Normally, it's publicly available and free of charge, and it's the case for everything that you will see in the guidance and in the gear tool. Sensibilization trainings are almost foreseen by every organization's GEP. Is it possible to have detailed guidelines and trainings organized by the EC? Thanks. Well, that's what the Gender Equality Academy project did. So they really published recommendations for the contents of trainings, and there's a lot of material on detailed guidelines. The gear tool is a detailed guideline. Again, go check the link. You will have the slides. There's a lot available, and the work that GE Academy has carried out, we strongly recommend. It's done. I think that was the, oh no. Are resources for implementing GEP eligible under Horizon? Well, no. If it's an eligibility criterion, if you need to have it beforehand, we do not give money, allocate money for implementing it, unless if it's under one of the projects that I mentioned, which are opening to intersections with other social categories, then there's money to implement measures. And we also reward past achievements through the EU Award for Gender Equality Champions. We will be merged with another research organizations in 2023. Shall we then revise our GEP, which we are actually working on? We start with 2 projects in September. Well, yes. Normally, if that other organization and you have already gender equality plans, if you then have one pick for the whole organization, you should have a joint gender equality plan. But a priori, I mean, it can also be a compilation of both, but indeed, you will need to fill in also the questionnaire as a joint organization, a merged organization. And okay, it's 4:30, one last question. If there is one, maybe this was the last one. It's the last one? I know. Oh, I guess it is the last one. Oh, I see the one at the bottom. As the project lead for Horizon 2020 project, are we responsible for getting every organization to have a GEP? Horizon 2020, or you mean Horizon Europe? I suppose you mean Horizon Europe. Well, it's in your interest, if you're the coordinators, to make sure that all your partners are ready for the grant agreement preparation stage. So yes, it's best, like you coordinate the distribution of tasks, the organization of the project, the drafting the proposal, that you also remind them that they need to have a gender equality plan in place. And that's it, I guess. So, well, I hope this was informative, this was helpful to you. And the recording of this webinar will be soon available with the slides and with links also to our own policy webpage that the gender sector in DG R&I has developed, which is frequently updated with links also to important material, policy changes, and this you're invited to consult regularly, and there's also a specific, and I don't know if we can switch to the presentation, and I will close with this. It's happening. Wow, it's really warm in the studio. I can see it's 29 degrees, so I'm sorry if I look a bit sweaty, but okay, and no, okay, I will go quickly. There. Oops. Sorry, it's live, it disappeared. There you go. So I didn't mention this, but national contact points for Horizon Europe are aware of this gender equality plan eligibility criterion, or if they were not, I hope through this webinar they will be, and you can contact them for this and for other aspects relating to Horizon Europe and different program parts. And we have a specific policy webpage, I just mentioned it, you have the link there, and there's also a specific functional mailbox if you have questions that have not been answered yet and today, that you can send your queries to. So that's the functional mailbox address that you see there. And I will close here, thanking very warmly the two speakers, and good luck with the design and implementation of your gender equality plan and your applications to Horizon Europe. Goodbye.